On the bridge of the carrier Akagi, Commander Mitsuo Fuchida felt a distant vibration. He stood immobilized by illness, unable to fly, unaware of the meticulously laid trap now closing. An empire's strategic initiative built on 6 months of victory was about to vanish. Just half a year earlier, the world echoed with the shock of Pearl Harbor. That attack was led from the sky by Fuchida himself, transforming him into a national hero. The carrier striking force he served, the Kido Butai, seemed unstoppable. It swept across the Pacific from Hawaii to the Indian Ocean. 4 carriers, symbols of Japan's naval might, had never known defeat. But on this morning, June 4th, 1942, appendicitis kept Fuchida confined. He was a captive observer to events he could not influence. The fleet's purpose was to neutralize Midway Island, drawing American carriers into decisive engagement. It was a strategy built on confidence in their power and impenetrable secrecy. What they couldn't know was that their naval codes, JN-25, had yielded secrets. These secrets emerged not in Washington, but in a dimly lit Pearl Harbor basement. There, a dedicated team under Commander Joseph Rochefort painstakingly pieced together fragments. Intercepted messages hinted at a major offensive against a target codenamed AF. Rochefort believed AF was Midway, a skepticism overcome by clever deception. Midway was instructed to send an unencrypted message about a failure in its distillation plant. Days later, intercepted Japanese traffic confirmed AF was reporting a water shortage. The target was confirmed, and Admiral Chester Nimitz was now armed with the enemy's plans. He positioned his carriers northeast of Midway, out of sight. The stage was set for the unfolding drama. The initial tremors began hours earlier at 7:15 a.m. A radio report crackled onto the Akagi's bridge. Lieutenant Tomonaga's voice confirmed Midway's land defenses were still operational. Vice Admiral Nagumo paced restlessly on the bridge. His reserve aircraft below deck were armed for ship-to-ship combat with torpedoes, but to continue striking the island, they needed bombs. Deep within the sweltering hangar decks, mechanics began the physically demanding rearming process. They hauled the heavy torpedoes off the planes, replacing them with high-explosive bombs. The confined spaces echoed with shouted commands and the metallic clang of ordnance. Then, a new, vague, and troubling message arrived. A scout plane reported 10 ships. Nagumo faced an agonizing choice. If American carriers were out there, he needed anti-ship torpedoes. He decided he could not risk it, ordering the mechanics to reverse course. Bombs were removed. Torpedoes were mounted again in a frantic reversal. There was no time to return the removed munitions to the ship's magazines. Bombs and torpedoes, fully armed and volatile, began to pile up. Fuel lines ran, and aircraft, fueled and waiting, crowded the spaces. Unseen by the command, the Akagi was transforming into a floating vessel primed for disaster. At 9:20 a.m., the first American strike reached the Japanese fleet. Low and slow, without fighter escort, Douglas Devastator torpedo bombers approached. Japanese Zero fighters, agile and experienced, swarmed them immediately. Fuchida watched from the bridge as the Zeros descended to sea level. Tracer fire streaked across the water, hitting American planes one after another. They plunged into the ocean. Not a single torpedo found its mark. On the Akagi's bridge, a sigh of relief, a sense of familiar victory spread. But Fuchida noticed something disquieting. The entire Japanese air combat patrol was gone. The sky directly above the fleet was left unexpectedly, perilously empty. By 10:20 a.m., the American attack had ceased. An unsettling quiet settled. Below deck, the frenzied rearming of the next wave of Japanese aircraft continued. It would be at least another 45 minutes before they could be launched. Yet, on the bridge, the mood remained confident for a counter-strike. Then, at precisely 10:22 a.m., the moment Fuchida had unwittingly anticipated arrived. He saw them. American dive bombers, dozens, peeling out of the clouds, screaming. There was nothing to stop them. Fuchida watched transfixed. A single bomb detached from a dauntless bomber, growing larger, aiming for the Akagi. The bomb punched through the flight deck near the midship elevator, detonating in the upper hangar. The explosion was a blinding flash followed by a shock wave that lifted Fuchida. He was hurled against a bulkhead. The chain reaction began instantly. The bomb had landed amidst the very munitions and fueled aircraft. Fires erupted, fuel ignited, and ordnance began to detonate in cascading blasts. The massive hull shuddered violently with each explosion. Fuchida struggled back to his knees, a searing pain shooting through his ankles. Smoke, thick and choking, poured from the shattered elevator shaft. He stumbled toward the railing. Nearby, Admiral Nagumo stood frozen, ashen-faced. Nagumo stared blankly ahead, unable to comprehend the sudden devastation. Fuchida forced himself to look out across the water. To starboard, a towering pillar of black smoke already rose from the Kaga. To port, another from the Soryu. In 6 short minutes, 3 carriers, the heart of the Kido Butai, were mortally wounded. This was not an overwhelming assault, but a handful of bombs at a devastating moment. Fuchida tried to move towards the damage control parties, but the heat drove him back. His old surgical wound from appendicitis tore open, but he barely registered the pain. Crew members, faces blackened, hands blistered, stumbled through smoke-filled passages. To abandon the Akagi was unthinkable. She was sovereign soil, a symbol of the Emperor. But the flames climbed higher. Ammunition exploded and the deck glowed with intense heat. Fuchida nodded his assent. The order for evacuation was given. The normal exits were engulfed in fire, forcing officers to slide down a rope. Fuchida grasped the line, his hands weak, but another explosion ripped through the ship. The blast wave threw him sideways, causing him to lose his grip and slam onto the deck. The fall was shattering. Both ankles snapped. Sailors dragged him to the edge, lowering him onto the light cruiser Nagara pulling alongside. He collapsed onto the smaller ship's deck, unable to stand. As the Nagara pulled away, Fuchida forced himself to lean against the railing. The Akagi was a burning cathedral, flames pouring from her flight deck. Smoke spiraled into the sky. Her hull listed slowly to port. Men were still jumping from her sides. Tiny figures against the inferno. The flagship was dying. Around her, the Kaga and Soryu burned as well. Later that afternoon, the Hiryu would join them beneath the waves. The technological superiority, veteran pilots, and strategic initiative were all now sinking. Fuchida felt something fundamental break inside him, deeper than his injuries. The Invincible Armada was gone forever. Commander Mitsuo Fuchida survived the Battle of Midway, enduring months of hospitalization. The Akagi burned for hours before Japanese destroyers scuttled her. The Kaga and Soryu met the same fate, destroyed by American dive bombers. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers, 3,057 men and 248 aircraft. Among the dead were 110 irreplaceable veteran aircrew and hundreds of expert mechanics. Their loss severely hampered future carrier operations, shifting the strategic balance. The Battle of Midway marked the end of Japan's offensive capability. It initiated the long, arduous American advance across the Pacific. Yet, the man whose quiet, painstaking work made this pivotal victory possible never received public recognition. Commander Joseph Rochefort, whose code-breaking team unlocked the Japanese plans, was recommended for a medal. Washington denied it twice. His success underscored their initial intelligence failures. Within months, he was reassigned to a floating dry dock in San Francisco. He passed away in 1976, his profound contribution largely unacknowledged. 43 years later, the Navy finally awarded him the medal posthumously. Fuchida would later write extensively about the battle, shaped by time and national pride. He claimed the carriers were 5 minutes from launching their decisive counterstrike. This narrative was contradicted by Japanese operational logs showing at least 45 minutes remained. He cast himself as the astute observer who spotted the critical vulnerability. Historians question whether he grasped its true significance in that fleeting moment. For the man who led Pearl Harbor, Midway became a profound, bitter irony. He witnessed his nation's greatest defeat as a helpless observer. He saw the precise moment when the rising sun began its slow descent,